The morning light filtered through the bakery's front windows in pale gold streams, catching the flour dust that perpetually hung in the air like snow that never quite settled. I wiped my hands on my apron, white cotton now streaked with butter and cinnamon, and glanced at the clock above the register. 6:30. The first customers would arrive soon, drawn by the scent of fresh bread and the promise of something warm in a world that had grown increasingly cold. My hands moved through familiar motions, kneading dough, shaping rolls, brushing egg wash across pastry tops until they gleamed. This rhythm had saved me. 4 years ago, I'd arrived in this border town with nothing but a battered suitcase, $200, and a secret growing inside me. The bakery had been abandoned then, its windows boarded, its ovens silent. I'd seen possibility where others saw ruin. Now it was mine, ours. The sound of small feet on the stairs made me turn. My son appeared in the doorway, his dark hair sticking up in every direction, his eyes still heavy with sleep. Those eyes, amber and ancient, far too knowing for a 3-year-old. Every time I looked at them, I saw him. The father my son would never know. The king I'd fled from in the darkest hour of night. Mama. His voice was soft, tentative. I heard the oven. Come here, sweetheart. I crouched down, opening my arms. He rushed into them, and I breathed in the scent of him, milk and lavender soap and something else. Something wild that no amount of human routine could quite mask. You're supposed to be sleeping. Couldn't. He pulled back, those amber eyes searching my face. Had the dream again. My heart clenched. Which dream? The forest. The big house with all the windows. He frowned, struggling with words too complex for his age. And the man. He's always looking for something. I smoothed his hair, fighting to keep my expression neutral. The dreams had started 6 months ago. At first, I dismissed them as normal childhood imagination. But they'd grown more specific, more insistent. He described places he'd never seen, faces he'd never met. The bond between parent and child was supposed to be strong among our kind. But this was something else entirely. It's just a dream, I lied, hating myself for it. How about you help me frost the cinnamon rolls? Mrs. Patterson will be here at 7, and you know how she likes them extra sweet. His face brightened immediately, the troubling dream forgotten. I lifted him onto the stool beside the work table and handed him a spatula. As he worked, tongue caught between his teeth in concentration, I let myself remember what I'd spent 4 years trying to forget. The palace. The ceremony. The moment our eyes had met across a ballroom filled with the most powerful shifters in the Northern Territories, and I'd felt the world tilt on its axis. I'd been nobody, a low-ranking Omega from a dying pack, brought to serve drinks at the Alpha King's coronation. He'd been everything, power and darkness and a loneliness so profound, it had called to something deep in my chest. One night. That's all it had been. One night where I'd believed in fairy tales, where his hands had been gentle, and his voice had promised me things that kings couldn't promise Omegas. One night before I'd overheard the council members discussing the political marriage they'd arranged, the high-born alpha female who would stand beside him and bear his heirs. I'd left before dawn. By the time I'd discovered I was pregnant, I was 3 states away, and using a false name. The bell above the door chimed. I glanced up, expecting Mrs. Patterson with her usual early arrival, and felt my blood turn to ice. 3 men stood in the doorway. They wore dark suits that screamed money and power, their postures radiating barely contained strength, but it was their eyes that gave them away. Eyes that reflected the light strangely, that saw too much. Shifters. And not just any shifters. Royal Guard. We're not open yet, I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. My son had gone still beside me, the spatula frozen in his small hand. The tallest one stepped forward, his gaze sweeping the bakery before landing on me. Recognition flickered across his face, brief but unmistakable. Ma'am, we're looking for someone. Lots of people come through here. I shifted slightly, positioning myself between them and my son. This is a bakery. Someone specific. His eyes hadn't left my face. We've been searching for 4 years. My pulse thundered in my ears. They couldn't know. I'd been so careful. False names, cash-only transactions, a life deliberately small and unremarkable. I'd buried every trace of who I'd been. Except for one. The guard's gaze shifted to my son, and I watched his expression change. Watched the moment of confusion become understanding. Understanding become shock. He took a step forward, and I felt power gather in the air around him. The kind of power that could shatter my carefully constructed world with a single word. "Mama?" My son's voice was small, frightened. His hand found mine, gripping tight. The guard's phone buzzed. He answered it without breaking eye contact with me, listening to whoever spoke on the other end. I saw his jaw tighten, saw something like sympathy flash across his face before the professional mask returned. "Understood, Your Majesty. Yes. I've found them." A pause. Both of them. The world seemed to contract, all the air sucked from the room. "Your Majesty. Not a search party sent by the Council. Not enforcers looking for a runaway Omega. Him." The guard lowered the phone. "The king is on his way. He'll be here within the hour." "No." The word escaped before I could stop it. He can't. I'm afraid that's not your decision to make." His voice wasn't unkind, but it was absolute. "You've been harboring the king's heir. There are laws." "I've been protecting my son." I heard the tremor in my voice and hated it. Hated the fear that made me sound weak. He doesn't know this life. He doesn't know what it means to be what he is. The guard's expression softened fractionally. "Ma'am, with all due respect, you can't hide what's in his blood. Surely you've noticed the signs." I had. God help me, I had. The dreams were only the beginning. Last month, when he'd gotten angry, every light in the bakery had flickered. 2 weeks ago, I'd found him standing in the garden at midnight, surrounded by moths that circled him like planets orbiting the sun. The power was growing, seeking expression, and I had no idea how to guide it. Because I wasn't strong enough. Because I'd never been meant for this. My son tugged on my hand. When I looked down, those amber eyes met mine with a clarity that stopped my breath. "Is it the man from my dreams?" he asked. "The one who's looking?" Before I could answer, the air in the bakery changed. It grew heavier, charged with electricity that made my skin prickle, and my instincts scream. The guards straightened immediately, their casual postures shifting to attention. And I knew. Even before the door opened again, even before I saw the shadow fall across the threshold, I knew. He'd found us. The Alpha King stepped into my bakery, and 4 years of distance collapsed into nothing. He was exactly as I remembered, tall and dark-haired, his features carved from stone and shadow, power radiating from him in waves that made my knees weak. But there was something different too, something harder in the set of his jaw, something desperate in the way his eyes swept the room. Those eyes, the same amber as our son's, locked onto the small figure beside me. Time stopped. I watched him take in every detail. The dark hair, the golden eyes, the way the child stood with one hand gripping my apron and the other curled into a small fist. Defensive, protective, so heartbreakingly brave. The king's face went white. His hands, which had destroyed armies and signed laws that governed millions, trembled. "Impossible," he breathed. Then, louder, his voice cracking on the word, "Impossible." My son stepped forward, slipping from my grasp before I could stop him. He tilted his head, studying the man who towered over him with the same intensity he applied to everything else in his world. "You're real," my son said, wonder coloring his voice. "I thought you were just in my head." The king dropped to his knees. The motion was so sudden, so unexpected, that even his guards startled. He knelt on the worn floorboards of my bakery, bringing himself to eye level with the child he'd never known existed, and I saw his careful control shatter. "What's your name?" His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. My son glanced back at me, seeking permission. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, could only watch as the two halves of my fractured world collided. "Ethan?" my son said finally, turning back to the king. "My name is Ethan. Ethan." The king repeated it like a prayer, like a promise, his hand lifted, hovering in the air between them, not quite touching. "I've been looking for you. I didn't know. I never knew." His eyes found mine then, and the accusation in them was like a physical blow. 4 years, he said, his voice dangerously soft. "You kept him from me for 4 years." I couldn't find my voice, couldn't find anything except the crushing weight of his gaze and the terrible understanding that everything I'd built was crumbling around me. The bakery suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing inward, trapping me with a truth I'd spent 4 years running from. "Your Majesty." One of the guards stepped forward, his tone careful. Perhaps this conversation would be better held somewhere more private. The king didn't look away from me. "Clear the street. I want a perimeter around this building. No one enters, no one leaves, and find somewhere for my son to wait while I speak with his mother. No." The word ripped from my throat before I could think. "You don't get to just walk in here and start giving orders about my son." "Your son." He rose to his feet in one fluid motion, and I was reminded viscerally of what he was. Not just a king, but an alpha in his prime, bred for dominance, capable of crushing anyone who challenged him. "He's mine too. Or did you think you could keep that from me forever?" "I kept him safe." My hands were shaking. I clenched them into fists, refusing to show weakness. "Do you have any idea what would have happened if I'd stayed? What the council would have done to him?" "To me? The council answers to me. The council controls you." The words came out bitter, edged with 4 years of resentment. "I heard them that night, planning your future, the arranged marriage to cement alliances, the heirs you'd produce with someone appropriate, someone who wasn't a nobody Omega who served drinks at your coronation." Something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps, or pain. "You heard." Every word. I felt Ethan press against my leg, his small body trembling. I gentled my voice with effort, speaking to the king while my hand found my son's hair, offering comfort. So I made a choice. I chose to give him a childhood, a normal life. Not one where he'd be a political pawn before he could even speak. "A normal life?" The king's laugh was harsh, humorless. "Look at him. Really look at him. Do you think he's normal? Do you think you can keep pretending he's human when the power is already manifesting?" My throat tightened. "I'm managing." "Are you?" He took a step closer, and I fought the urge to retreat. "Can you teach him control? Can you show him how to channel the strength that's growing in him every day? Can you protect him when other packs sense what he is and come looking? I've protected him this far, by hiding, by running." His voice dropped, became almost gentle. "But you can't run forever, and you shouldn't have to." The kindness in his tone was worse than the anger. It slipped past my defenses, found the exhaustion I'd been carrying like a stone in my chest. 4 years of looking over my shoulder. 4 years of every knock on the door sending my heart racing. 4 years of watching my son develop abilities I couldn't explain or control, terrified that someone would notice, that someone would take him from me. "Mama." Ethan's voice was muffled against my leg. "I don't like when you're scared." The king's expression softened as he looked at our son. "I'm not here to hurt your mother, Ethan. I promise you that." "Then why is she shaking?" The question hung in the air between us. The king's jaw worked, and when he spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion I couldn't name, because I frightened her once, a long time ago, and she's been running ever since. One of the guards cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, if I may, there's a small office in the back. Perhaps the boy could wait there with some breakfast while you and Miss Elena," I said quietly. My real name. After 4 years of aliases, it felt strange on my tongue. "My name is Elena." The king's eyes closed briefly, as if the sound of my name caused physical pain. "Elena. I remember." Of course he did. I'd gasped it into his shoulder that night, whispered it against his mouth between kisses that had tasted like forever. Foolish, desperate girl that I'd been. "Ethan." I crouched down, bringing myself to his level. "These men need to talk to Mama about grown-up things. Can you be brave and wait in the office? I'll bring you some milk and cinnamon rolls." His lower lip trembled. "You'll come back?" "I promise, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere." The lie tasted bitter. I had no idea what would happen in the next hour, what rights I had, what claims the king could make, but I wouldn't let my son see my fear. He nodded slowly, then surprised me by turning to the king. "You have to promise, too." The king blinked. "Promise what?" "That you won't make Mama cry." Ethan's small chin lifted defiant. "I don't know you yet, but she's mine, and I don't let people make her sad." I watched something crack in the king's careful composure. He knelt again, meeting Ethan at eye level with a solemnity that would have been funny in any other context. "I give you my word," he said, and the formal phrasing carried weight, carried power. "On my honor as king, I will not harm your mother. Ethan studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. One of the guards, younger, with kind eyes, extended a hand. Come on, little prince. Let's see what kind of pastries your mom has hiding in the back. The title made me flinch, but Ethan didn't seem to notice. He took the guard's hand and let himself be led away, glancing back only once before disappearing through the door. The silence he left behind was crushing. The king moved first, crossing to the window and pulling down the shade. The other guards positioned themselves outside, their backs to the glass, creating privacy, creating a cage. 4 years, he said again, his back still to me. 4 years of searching. Do you know what that does to a person? Knowing that somewhere out there, the woman who... He stopped, his shoulders rigid. I thought you were dead. The words hit me like a fist. What? When you disappeared that night, I thought... He turned, and the anguish on his face stole my breath. The council told me you'd been killed, an attack on the servants' quarters. They showed me ashes, said they'd identified your remains through dental records. Horror washed over me. They lied to you. They lied to their king, his hands clenched at his sides. And I believed them. For 6 months, I believed you were gone. I mourned you. I nearly started a war trying to find who was responsible, a bitter laugh. Then one of my guards got drunk and let something slip. A conversation he'd overheard, questions about a young woman matching your description, last seen boarding a bus 3 states away. So you've known I was alive for 3.5 years. He took a step toward me, his eyes blazing. 3.5 years of following dead ends, of finding towns you'd already left, of always being 1 step behind. Another step. And never, not once, did it occur to me that you might be pregnant, that you might be carrying my... His voice broke. He pressed a hand to his face, and I saw the careful control he'd maintained since entering the bakery begin to fracture. I didn't know, I whispered. Not until I'd been gone for 6 weeks, and by then you decided I wasn't worth telling. The accusation was quiet, devastating. By then I'd heard about your wedding. The words came out sharper than I intended. To the Alpha's daughter from the Western Pack. Very strategic, from what the news said. Very appropriate. He stared at me. I didn't marry her. What? I called it off. The council was furious, threatened to withdraw their support, but He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so human it hurt. I couldn't do it. Couldn't stand there and pledge myself to someone else when every time I closed my eyes, I saw you, when I could still smell lavender in my sheets weeks after you'd gone. The admission hung between us, raw and bleeding. I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe him. That's a pretty story, I said, hating how my voice shook. But it doesn't change anything. You're the king. You need heirs, alliances, someone who fits into your world. I was never going to be that person. So you decided for both of us. He was close now. Close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him, smell cedar and smoke and something wild. Decided that I didn't deserve to know about my son, that I didn't deserve the choice. What choice? The question came out broken. You would have tried to do the right thing. Bring me back to court, maybe even offer marriage out of obligation. And I would have spent every day knowing I'd trapped you, that you were with me because of duty, not what? His hand caught my chin, tilting my face up. The touch sent electricity racing down my spine. Say it, Elena. Not what? Not because you wanted me. The truth escaped in a whisper. Not because I was enough. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, and I realized I was crying. When had I started crying? You left before I could tell you, he said, his voice rough. Left before I could explain that what happened between us wasn't casual for me. It wasn't a one-night distraction before I married someone else. His forehead pressed against mine, and I felt him trembling. You undid me, Elena. One night, and you completely undid me. I wanted to pull away, wanted to protect myself from hope that would only lead to more heartbreak. But my body betrayed me, swaying toward him like a flower toward the sun. We can't, I breathed. There's too much. The council, the politics, your position. I am the king. The words vibrated with power, with absolute certainty. The council serves at my pleasure. The politics bend to my will, and my position means that I can protect what's mine. I'm not yours, aren't you? His hands framed my face, gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. Tell me you didn't feel it that night. Tell me you don't feel it now, this pull between us. Tell me I'm the only one who's been half alive for 4 years. I couldn't. Because it would be a lie, and we'd had enough lies between us. What do you want from me? The question came out defeated, exhausted. Everything. No hesitation. I want you to come home. You and Ethan. I want to know my son. I want to... He paused, choosing his words carefully. I want the chance to do this right, to be what you both need. And if I say no, pain flashed across his face, then I'll respect your choice. But I'm not walking away from Ethan. He's my heir, Elena. The only child I have. The council will demand he be brought to court. Trained, prepared for his eventual role. He's 3 years old. He's the future king. Gentle, implacable. And whether we like it or not, that comes with responsibilities, with dangers. There are already whispers spreading. My guards aren't subtle, and news travels fast in our world. By nightfall, every pack in the Northern Territories will know the king's missing heir has been found. Fear coiled in my stomach. What does that mean? It means you have a target on your back. Both of you. His hand slid down to my shoulders, steadying. It means enemies I've made will see you as leverage. It means packs who want to challenge my authority will see Ethan as a symbol to rally around or destroy. It means you can't stay here, in this bakery, pretending you're human and hoping no one notices. The truth of it settled over me like a shroud. He was right. I'd always known this day would come, had just hoped, stupidly, desperately, that I'd have more time. I built a life here, I said, hearing the plea in my own voice. A good life. Safe and quiet and, I know. His thumbs traced circles on my shoulders, soothing. And I'm sorry I'm destroying it. But Elena, please, let me give you something better. Let me give you safety that doesn't require hiding. Let me give our son a future where he doesn't have to be afraid of what he is. Our son. The words shouldn't have affected me so much, but they did. I need time, I whispered. To think. To process. The window exploded inward. Glass rained down in glittering shards. And the king's body slammed into mine, taking us both to the floor behind the counter. His weight pressed me against the worn floorboards as something dark and massive crashed through the space where we'd been standing moments before. Snarls erupted outside, shouting, the unmistakable sound of bones breaking and reforming. Stay down. The king's voice was barely recognizable, deeper, rougher, touched by the beast that lived beneath his skin. He was off me in an instant, moving with inhuman speed toward the ruined window. I scrambled to my knees, my mind screaming one word. Ethan. The office. He was in the office with the guard. Safe. He had to be safe. Another crash, this time from the back of the bakery, the sound of splintering wood. My heart lurched into my throat as I heard my son scream, not in pain, but in fear. I was running before I could think, ignoring the king's shouted command to stop. The office door hung crooked on its hinges. Inside, the young guard with the kind eyes stood in front of Ethan, his body shifted halfway between human and wolf, blood streaming from a gash across his ribs. Facing him was something out of nightmare. A massive wolf with matted gray fur and eyes that burned red with madness. A rogue. I could smell it on him, the sickness that came from rejecting pack bonds, from living too long on the edges of sanity. Ethan, close your eyes. I didn't recognize my own voice. The rogue's head swung toward me, lips peeling back from yellow teeth. The guard used the distraction to lunge, catching the creature's shoulder, driving it back. They went down in a tangle of fur and fury, crashing into my desk, sending papers and receipts flying. I grabbed Ethan, hauling him against my chest. His small arms locked around my neck, his face buried in my shoulder. He was shaking so hard I could feel it in my bones. It's okay, baby. I've got you. I've got you. The guard was losing. The rogue was bigger, stronger, driven by whatever demons had fractured his mind. Blood spattered across the wall. I couldn't tell whose. The young guard's movements were growing slower, more desperate. The rogue broke free, turning toward us with single-minded focus. Hunting. Ethan was what it wanted. The king's heir. The ultimate prize for a creature with nothing left to lose. I backed toward the corner, knowing it was futile. I was Omega. Weak. I'd never been a fighter. but I'd die before I let this thing touch my son. The rogue gathered itself to spring, and the king appeared in the doorway like vengeance given form. He didn't bother with words, didn't shift. Simply moved with speed that blurred the edges of reality, caught the rogue mid-leap, and slammed it into the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. The impact should have killed it, would have killed anything human, but rogues were hard to kill. It twisted in his grip, claws raking across his chest, tearing through his shirt and the flesh beneath. The king's jaw clenched, but he didn't let go. His hand found the creature's throat, and power rolled off him in waves that made the air shimmer. "You dare," he growled, and his voice held the weight of absolute authority, of a command that went bone deep. "Attack what is mine." The rogue thrashed, its movements becoming more frantic, more desperate, but the king's grip was iron, inexorable. I watched as the light began to fade from those red eyes, as the struggle became twitches, as "Stop." The word escaped before I could catch it. The king's head turned toward me, and for a moment I saw something utterly inhuman looking back, something ancient and merciless. "Please." I held Ethan tighter, felt him trembling against me, not in front of him. Understanding flickered across the king's face. His expression shifted, became something more recognizably human. He looked down at the now limp rogue in his hands, then at the young guard struggling to his feet, blood dripping from his wounds. "Take it outside," he ordered, his voice still rough but controlled. "Make it quick, make it clean." 2 more guards appeared, moving past me to haul the unconscious rogue away. The king remained where he was, chest heaving, blood staining his torn shirt. Slowly, carefully, he approached us. I flinched without meaning to. He stopped immediately, holding up his hands. "Elena, it's me. I won't hurt you. I know." My voice came out small. "I know, Ethan lifted his head from my shoulder. His eyes were wide, frightened, but there was something else there too. Recognition. Wonder. "You're like me," he whispered, staring at the king. "When I get angry, things break. When I get scared, I can feel something inside me wanting to come out." The king's expression crumbled. He sank to his knees in front of us, heedless of the blood and broken glass. "Yes," he said softly, "just like you. Does it hurt?" "Sometimes. Honest. But it gets easier. With training, with control." Ethan considered this, his small face serious beyond his years. Then, slowly, he reached out one hand toward the king, toward his father. The king looked at that tiny hand like it was the most precious thing in the world. His own hand, so much larger, still stained with the rogue's blood, trembled as he reached back. Their fingers touched. The air in the room seemed to hold its breath. I felt it. The moment the bond snapped into place. Not the forced connection of a mating, but something else. Something deeper. The recognition between parent and child, between 2 halves of the same power. Ethan's eyes went wide. "I can feel you," he breathed. "Inside my head. Like the dreams, but real." "I can feel you too." The king's voice broke. "God, you're so bright, so strong." I wanted to cry, wanted to rage, wanted to grab my son and run, even though I knew running was no longer possible. The attack had proved that. Somehow word had spread faster than the king's guards could contain it. My son was already a target. "Your Majesty." One of the older guards appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "We've secured the perimeter, but there's movement in the woods. At least 3 more rogues, possibly more. They're coordinating, which means someone sent them." The king's voice was flat, dangerous. He stood carefully, keeping himself between us and the door. "This wasn't random. This was a strike force. Agreed. We need to move, sir. This position is indefensible." I found my voice. "Where? Where can we possibly go that's safe?" The king looked at me, and I saw the answer in his eyes before he spoke. "Home. To the palace." "No." The refusal was automatic, visceral. "Elena, you said I had a choice. You said you'd respect. That was before rogues started throwing themselves through your windows." His control was fraying, the fear beneath it showing through. That was before our son became a target. Before someone decided that killing him would be worth risking my wrath. Then we'll go somewhere else, another town, another state. And how long before they find you again? How long before the next attack, and the next? And you're not lucky enough to have guards nearby? He caught my shoulders, not rough, but desperate. Please. I know you don't trust me. I know you don't want this life, but I am begging you. Let me protect you both. Ethan's hand found mine, squeezing tight. When I looked down, those amber eyes, so like his father's, met mine with startling clarity. Mama, I'm scared, he said quietly. And I think he can keep us safe. The simple faith in his voice broke something in me. How long? I asked the king, my voice hollow. How long would we have to stay? Until we find out who sent the rogues. Until we eliminate the threat. He paused. Until I can guarantee your safety wherever you choose to go. The unspoken truth hung between us. That might be never. Once the world knew Ethan existed, once other packs and councils and enemies understood what he represented, we would always be targets. The only question was whether we'd face those threats with the king's protection or without it. I want your word, I said, forcing steel into my spine. That if I do this, if I bring him to the palace, you won't try to take him from me. That I remain his mother, with all the rights that entails. You have it. On my life, on my throne, you have it. And when the threat is gone, if I want to leave, I won't stop you. The words seemed to cost him, though I'll do everything in my power to convince you to stay. I looked around the bakery that had been my sanctuary. 4 years of work, of building something with my own hands. The ovens I'd restored, the tables I'd refinished, the community I'd become part of. All of it about to be left behind, but Ethan's safety, that came before everything. Okay, I whispered. Okay, we'll go. The king's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you. I promise you won't. Don't. I cut him off. Don't make promises you might not be able to keep. He nodded slowly, then turned to his guards. Prepare the vehicles. I want a 3-car convoy, rotating drivers and scouts ahead and behind. We leave in 10 minutes. The guards moved with military precision, speaking into radios, coordinating. The king turned back to me, his expression softening. You'll need to pack. Essentials only. We can send for the rest later. I almost laughed. We don't have much. We've always traveled light. Something painful crossed his face at that reminder of the years I'd spent running. But he just nodded and stepped aside, letting me carry Ethan toward the stairs that led to our small apartment above the bakery. Our home. For 4 more years, it had been our home. Ethan was quiet as I packed, his eyes tracking my movements. I grabbed clothes, his favorite stuffed bear, the handful of books I'd collected. Everything fit into 2 small bags. The entirety of our lives, reduced to things that could be carried. Mama? His voice was small. Are we coming back? I wanted to say yes, wanted to promise him that this was temporary, that we'd return to our normal life, but I was done lying to my son. I don't know, sweetheart, but wherever we go, we'll be together. That's what matters. He nodded, accepting this with a resilience that hurt my heart. Too young to have to be this brave. Too young to have to understand why his world was being torn apart. A knock at the door. The king's voice, gentler than before. Elena? We need to move. I shouldered the bags, took Ethan's hand, and opened the door. The king stood in the narrow hallway, looking absurdly large in the cramped space. His eyes went to our meager luggage, and something flickered in his expression. Is this everything? This is everything that matters. He reached for one of the bags. Let me. I can carry it. We stood there for a moment, locked in silent battle over something as simple as luggage. Finally, he stepped back, gesturing for me to go first. The bakery looked different as we descended the stairs. Broken, violated. Glass still glittered on the floor near the ruined window. The office door hung at an angle. Blood stained the walls, reminders of how quickly violence had shattered my carefully constructed peace. Outside, 3 black SUVs idled at the curb, their engines rumbling. Guards stood at attention, their eyes scanning the street, the roof lines, the shadowed alleys, ready for another attack. The king's hand settled on the small of my back, guiding me toward the middle vehicle. You'll ride with me. Extra protection. I wanted to argue, to insist on independence I no longer had. But Ethan's hand tightened in mine, and I felt him trembling despite his brave face, so I climbed into the SUV, settling Ethan on my lap even though there was a car seat waiting. I needed to hold him, needed to feel his heartbeat against mine, and know he was safe. The king slid in beside us, his presence filling the space. The door closed with a heavy thunk, sealing us in. Through the tinted windows, I watched the bakery, my bakery, recede as we pulled away from the curb. "I'm sorry," the king said quietly. "I know what you're losing." I didn't answer. Couldn't trust my voice. Ethan shifted in my arms, his head tilting back to look at the king. "Where's your palace?" "North of here, in the mountains." A slight smile touched the king's lips. "It's very big, with lots of rooms to explore, and a library with books about everything you could imagine. Even dinosaurs?" "Especially dinosaurs." Ethan considered this. "Mama likes libraries, too. She reads to me every night, does she?" The king's eyes found mine, warm and aching. "What does she read?" "Stories about brave people and adventures, and sometimes about magic. Magic is real, you know." The king's hand lifted, and I watched as he held his palm up. A small flame sparked to life, dancing in the center of his hand without burning him. Ethan gasped in delight. "How?" "It's part of what we are, part of what you'll learn to do." The flame extinguished. "There's so much I want to teach you, Ethan. So much I want to show you." My son's eyes shone with wonder, and I felt something twist in my chest. This moment of connection between father and son, was what I'd denied them both. What I'd stolen in my fear. The king caught my expression. His hand found mine where it rested on Ethan's shoulder, squeezed gently. "No regrets," he murmured, too low for Ethan to hear. "You did what you thought was right, protected him the only way you knew how." "I understand that now. Do you?" I searched his face. "Or are you just saying what I need to hear?" "Both, maybe." A wry smile. "I'm furious at what I missed, but I also understand why you ran. The council, they would have tried to control this. Control him. Turn him into a weapon or a symbol before he even understood what he was." His thumb traced circles on my hand. "You gave him childhood, normalcy, love. That's not nothing, Elena." The kindness in his voice threatened to undo me. I blinked hard, forcing back tears. The convoy drove through the afternoon, leaving the small town behind, heading into wilderness. Trees thickened on either side of the road, and the air grew cooler. We were climbing into the mountains, into territory I'd avoided for 4 years, into the heart of the king's power. Ethan fell asleep against my chest, exhausted by fear and adrenaline. I held him close, breathing in the scent of him, trying not to think about what waited at the end of this journey. The king watched us both with an expression I couldn't read, longing perhaps, or grief for the years he'd lost. "When we arrive," he said quietly, "there will be protocols, announcements. The council will want to meet him immediately." "No." The word came out sharp. "He just survived an attack. He's terrified and exhausted. They can wait." I expected argument. Expected him to pull rank, to remind me that he was king and I was... What? Nothing. Nobody. Instead, he nodded. "You're right. The council can wait. Tonight we rest. Tomorrow we'll face the court together. Together. As if we were a unit. A family." I looked away, unable to process the hope that word sparked in my chest. Outside the window, the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Beautiful and terrible, like everything else in this new world I'd been pulled into. The palace came into view as darkness fell, a sprawling complex of stone and glass built into the mountainside, lights glowing in hundreds of windows. It was magnificent, imposing, utterly terrifying. "Welcome home," the king murmured. But I didn't feel welcomed. I felt trapped, and I had no idea how to escape. The palace entrance was a cavern of marble and gold, lit by chandeliers that threw fractured light across polished floors. Guards lined the corridors, their eyes tracking us as we passed. Servants in crisp uniforms paused in their tasks to stare. Word had spread. The king had returned with his lost heir. And with the Omega, who'd hidden the child for 4 years, I felt their judgment like a physical weight. Saw it in the tightness around their mouths, the whispered conversations that stopped as we approached. I pulled Ethan closer, his sleeping weight a comfort against my chest. "Ignore them," the king murmured, his hand at my back again, possessive, protective. "They'll learn to accept you, will they?" I kept my voice low. "Or will they always see me as the woman who stole their prince?" He didn't answer. Couldn't, perhaps. We climbed a grand staircase, then another, moving deeper into the palace. The opulence was overwhelming. artwork that probably cost more than my bakery, rugs that felt like walking on clouds, windows that overlooked mountain vistas even in darkness. Finally, we stopped before an ornate door. The king pushed it open, revealing a suite that was larger than my entire apartment had been. "These will be your rooms," he said. "Connected to mine through that door if you need anything. And Ethan." He crossed to another door, opening it to reveal a child's bedroom that looked like something from a fantasy. A bed shaped like a castle, walls painted with forests and creatures, shelves full of toys and books. I had them prepare this. I hope he likes it. My throat tightened. "When did you have time? I've had 3.5 years to hope." His voice was rough. "Every time we got close to finding you, I'd add something to this room. A way to keep believing that someday I'd fill it." The admission broke something in me. I looked at the careful details, the dinosaur figurines on the shelf, the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, the stuffed animals arranged on the bed, each one a prayer, each one a wish. "He'll love it," I whispered. The king's shoulders sagged with relief. "There's a bath through there, and the closet has clothes in various sizes. I wasn't sure how big he'd be." "For you," he gestured to the main bedroom, his expression almost shy. "I had them prepare options. If nothing fits, just tell the attendants and they'll bring more." I carried Ethan to the castle bed, laying him down gently. He stirred but didn't wake, his small face peaceful despite everything. I pulled a blanket over him, smoothed his dark hair back from his forehead. When I turned, the king was watching from the doorway, his expression raw with longing. "You can..." I paused, unsure how to navigate this. "You can say goodnight to him, if you want." He moved with careful slowness, as if afraid I might change my mind, knelt beside the bed, his large hand hovering over Ethan's small one before finally settling. Their fingers looked so similar. The same long shape, the same slight curl. "Sleep well, my son," he murmured. "You're safe now. I promise you that." The tenderness in his voice made my chest ache. This was what I'd denied him, this simple moment of tucking his child into bed, of making promises in the dark. He stood, and we retreated to the main room, leaving the door cracked so I could hear if Ethan woke. An attendant appeared, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a professional demeanor, carrying a tray of food. "I thought you might be hungry, Miss Elena." She set the tray on a small table near the window. "Nothing too heavy. Soup and bread, some fruit, and tea if you'd like." The normalcy of it was jarring. An hour ago, I'd been fighting for my life. Now I was being offered tea. "Thank you," I managed. She nodded and withdrew, closing the door with a soft click. The king and I stood in awkward silence. He'd cleaned up somewhat, changed his torn shirt, washed the blood from his hands. But I could still see the scratches on his chest where the rogue's claws had caught him, already healing, but visible through the open collar of his fresh shirt. "You should eat," he said finally. "You've been through..." "Don't." I held up a hand. "Don't treat me like I'm fragile. I've survived 4 years on my own. I don't need coddling." His jaw tightened. "I'm not trying to coddle you. I'm trying to take care of you. I don't need..." I stopped, hearing how childish I sounded. Took a breath. "I'm sorry. I'm just... This is a lot. I know." He moved to the window, putting distance between us, and I'm pushing too hard. Seeing you again. Seeing him. His hand dragged through his hair. I've imagined this moment 1,000 times, planned what I'd say, how I'd make you understand. But now that you're here, I don't know how to... He trailed off, frustrated. I crossed to the table, sank into one of the chairs. The soup smelled incredible, rich and savory, with herbs I couldn't identify. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten since before dawn. "You could start by sitting down," I said quietly, "and maybe explaining what happens next." He turned, surprise flickering across his face at the olive branch. Then he moved to the other chair, settling into it with a grace that seemed at odds with his size. "Tomorrow, I'll need to present Ethan to the council. It's tradition, the formal acknowledgement of an heir. They'll want to question him, assess his abilities. He's 3. I know, and I'll keep it brief. But Elena, They need to see him, to understand that he's real, that he's mine. Otherwise, there will be challenges. Other alphas claiming I've invented him to avoid another arranged marriage. Rivals suggesting he's not actually of my bloodline. The thought of anyone questioning Ethan's parentage made my blood boil. One look at his eyes should settle that. You'd think. A bitter smile. But politics are rarely about truth. They're about power and perception, which is why I need you there too. I set down my spoon. Me? His mother. The woman who... He paused, choosing words carefully. The woman I'm claiming as my mate. The room seemed to tilt. What? It's the only way to protect you both. He leaned forward, earnest. If I acknowledge Ethan but not you, the council will try to remove you from his life. They'll argue that an Omega with no rank or connections isn't suitable to raise the heir. They'll find some noble family to foster him, or assign governesses and tutors who'll push you to the sidelines. Horror washed over me. They can't. They can. They've done it before. To other royal children. It's considered proper, ensuring the heir is raised with appropriate influence. His hand found mine across the table. But if you're my mate, if we're bonded, then you have rights they can't challenge. You become queen, with all the protection that title carries. You're talking about a political arrangement. I'm talking about survival. His grip tightened. Yours and Ethan's. The bond doesn't have to be. We don't have to consummate it immediately. We can take time, let you adjust. But on paper, in the eyes of the court, you'd be mine and I'd be yours. Unassailable. My head was spinning. This is insane. This is the world we live in. He pulled back, giving me space. I know it's not what you want. I know you didn't choose this life. But I'm asking you to consider it, for Ethan's sake, if not your own. I looked toward the cracked door, where my son slept peacefully, unaware of the machinations swirling around him. The king was right. I'd seen enough of shifter politics to know how ruthless the council could be. They'd take Ethan from me without a second thought if they believed it served their interests. If I agree, I said slowly, what exactly would this bond entail? A formal ceremony, bite marks exchanged, though we can do them in private, nothing public. He grimaced. Some paperwork, surprisingly, a lot of paperwork. And then you'd live here, as queen. You'd have duties, appearances to make. But you'd also have power, resources, the ability to protect not just Ethan, but others who need it. And you? What would you get out of this arrangement? His eyes met mine, and the heat in them made my breath catch. A family, the chance to know my son. And maybe, if I'm very lucky and very patient, the chance to win the heart of the woman I let slip away 4 years ago. That's not fair. My voice came out shaky. You can't say things like that when I'm trying to think clearly. Why not? A slight smile. You've had 4 years to think clearly. Maybe it's time to feel instead. Feeling is what got me into this situation in the first place. Would you take it back? The question was soft, devastating. If you could go back to that night, knowing what you know now, would you walk away from me? I wanted to say yes, wanted to claim I regretted everything. But I looked at that cracked door again, thought of the beautiful child sleeping beyond it, and knew the truth. No, I whispered. I wouldn't. His breath released in a rush. Then give me a chance, Elena. Let me prove that I can be what you both need. That this, he gestured between us, wasn't just one night, that it meant something. That it still means something. Before I could answer, a sharp knock sounded at the door. The king's expression hardened immediately, his body shifting to place himself between me and the potential threat. Your Majesty. A guard's voice. Urgent. The council is demanding an emergency session. They've heard about the attack and want answers. The king's jaw clenched. Tell them it can wait until morning. Sir, they're invoking Article 7. You're required to appear within the hour. A low growl rumbled from the king's chest. Of course they are. He turned to me, frustration clear in every line of his body. I have to go, but I'll have guards posted outside your door, vetted personally, people I trust with my life. How long will you be gone? As long as it takes to remind the council who rules here. He moved toward the door, then paused. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except me or the guards I'm leaving. And if anything, Anything feels wrong. There's a panic button beside the bed. Press it, and every guard in the palace will come running. The fear in his instructions chilled me. You think they'd try something? Here? I think someone sent rogues to kill my son today, and I don't know who yet. His eyes blazed. Until I do, I'm not taking chances. He left, and I heard him speaking in low tones to the guards outside before his footsteps faded down the corridor. I locked the door as instructed, then moved to check on Ethan, still sleeping, his chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. I should have felt safe, protected by guards, locked in a palace, far from the dangers that had shattered my bakery windows. Instead, I felt exposed, vulnerable in ways I'd never been when I was just another anonymous face in a border town. I returned to the main room, too restless to sleep. The food sat forgotten on the table. Through the window, I could see lights in other parts of the palace, shadows moving behind curtains. How many people lived here? How many would resent me for appearing out of nowhere to claim a position beside their king? The tea had gone cold, but I poured a cup anyway, needing something to do with my hands. The liquid was bitter, medicinal. I forced it down, feeling it settle warm in my stomach. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. I'd lost all sense of time. A soft sound from Ethan's room brought me to my feet. I hurried to the door, pushing it open to find him sitting up in bed, his eyes wide and frightened. Mama? Where are we? We're safe, sweetheart. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulling him into my lap. Remember? We came to the palace. I had the dream again, his small hands clutched at my shirt. But it was different this time. The man, my father. He was fighting something dark, and he was scared. My blood chilled. It was just a dream, baby. No! He pulled back, those amber eyes too ancient, too knowing. Mama, he's in trouble. I can feel it. Something bad is happening. Before I could respond, shouts erupted from somewhere in the palace. Distant but growing closer, the sound of running feet, of doors slamming. And then, cutting through everything else, a howl of rage and pain that made every instinct in my body scream danger. The king's howl. I clutched Ethan tighter, my heart hammering against my ribs. The guards outside my door were shouting, radios crackling with urgent communication I couldn't make out. Something had gone very wrong. The door handle rattled. Once, twice, then a voice I didn't recognize. Open up. We're evacuating this wing. Every instinct screamed not to trust it. The king had said not to open the door for anyone but him or his chosen guards. But Ethan was shaking in my arms, and those shouts were getting closer, and the window behind us exploded inward. I threw myself over Ethan, shielding him with my body as glass rained down. Heavy footsteps hit the floor behind us. Not rogues this time. These were coordinated, controlled, professional. Take them both, alive. Hands grabbed me, hauling me up despite my struggles. I kicked out, connected with something solid, heard a grunt of pain, but there were too many of them, and I was too weak. Mama! Ethan's scream tore through me. Let him go. I thrashed harder, desperate. Please, he's just a child. Something pressed against my neck. Cold metal. A needle. Sleep, a voice murmured. This will all be easier if you sleep. I tried to fight it. Tried to stay conscious to protect my son. But darkness was already pulling me under, thick and suffocating. The last thing I heard was Ethan crying my name. Then nothing. Block 5. I woke to the smell of damp stone and old blood. My head throbbed, thoughts moving through mud. I tried to lift my hand to my temple and found my wrists bound with rope that burned like silver-laced iron. Panic cleared the fog immediately. Ethan, his name ripped from my throat, hoarse and desperate. He's here. The voice came from my left, male, unfamiliar, edged with something that might have been amusement. Sleeping. We gave him a lighter dose, didn't want to damage the merchandise. My eyes adjusted to the dim light. We were in some kind of cellar, the walls rough-hewn stone that wept moisture. A single bulb swung overhead, casting shadows that danced like demons. Ethan lay on a thin blanket against the far wall, his chest rising and falling. Alive. Thank God, alive. 3 figures stood between us. 2 were large, clearly guards. The third was smaller, dressed in expensive clothes that seemed absurd in this dank space. An older man with silver hair and cold eyes that assessed me like livestock. Finally awake. He stepped closer, and I caught his scent. Shifter, high-ranking, touched with the staleness that came from too many years playing political games. I was beginning to worry we'd miscalculated the dosage. That would have been unfortunate. Who are you? I pulled against the restraints, ignoring the burn. What do you want? Councilman Garrett. And what I want is quite simple, leverage. He crouched down to my level, his smile cold. The king has become problematic. Refuses to see reason regarding certain policies, certain alliances. We'd hoped his desperation to find you might make him more amenable to guidance. Instead, it's made him reckless. Understanding crashed over me. You're the ones who told him I was dead. A necessary fiction. We needed him focused on ruling, not pining after some Omega who'd shared his bed for a single night. His tone was dismissive, contemptuous. You were supposed to stay gone, stay irrelevant. Instead, you produced an heir and complicated everything. So you sent the rogues, not to kill, not initially, to frighten, to drive you into the king's arms in the palace, where you could be properly controlled, he sighed. Unfortunately, rogues are unpredictable creatures. They got overeager. My mind raced, trying to understand. If you wanted us at the palace, why take us now? Because the king refuses to be controlled. Garrett's expression hardened. Tonight, we presented him with a simple choice. Accept the marriage alliance we've arranged, produce additional heirs with a suitable mate, and we'd accept the boy as legitimate. A compromise. And he refused. He challenged the entire council, declared that he'd already chosen his queen. Garrett's lips twisted. You. An Omega with no family, no connections, no value except what you've stolen. The hatred in his voice was palpable. I forced myself to meet his eyes, to not show the fear coursing through me. So what's your plan? Kill us both? That won't make him more cooperative. Kill you? No. He stood, brushing off his pants. But accidents happen, especially to Omegas who wander where they shouldn't. And small children are so fragile, so susceptible to illness, to tragedy. If you were to disappear, and the boy were to sicken and die, well, the king would mourn, certainly, but he'd move forward, except that he needs to secure the succession properly. Cold rage flooded my veins. You're going to murder a child to maintain your political power. We're going to do what's necessary for the kingdom. No remorse, no humanity. The king's obsession with you threatens the stability we've built. Better to cut out the infection before it spreads. He'll know. My voice was steady, cold. He'll know you were responsible and he'll destroy you. Will he? A grieving king, told that his lost love and rediscovered son were killed by the same rogue pack that attacked them earlier? That his guards failed to protect them despite his orders? Garrett shook his head. No. He'll blame himself. His judgment, his weakness, and in his grief, he'll be malleable again. One of the guards shifted uncomfortably. Sir, about the boy, he's very young. Maybe we could... Are you questioning me? Garrett's voice dropped to a dangerous purr. No, sir. Just, he's the king's bloodline. If there's another way, there isn't. Final. Absolute. Make the arrangements. I want it done before dawn, before anyone thinks to look in the old wine cellars. The guards nodded and withdrew, leaving Garrett alone with us. He looked down at me with something like pity. For what it's worth, I believe you loved him, in your simple way. He moved toward the stairs, but love doesn't build kingdoms, power does. Remember that. In whatever comes next, the door closed behind him with a hollow boom. A lock clicked into place. I was alone with my unconscious son in a cellar beneath the palace, with perhaps an hour before someone came to kill us both. Think. I had to think. The ropes around my wrists were tight, the silver content making my skin blister where it touched. But the pole they'd tied me to was old wood, and when I tested it, I felt it give slightly. Not much, but maybe enough. I braced my feet against the floor and pulled. The burn intensified, spreading up my arms. I bit back a scream, refusing to make noise that might bring the guards back sooner, pulled harder. The wood creaked, shifted. Come on, come on. A splinter drove into my palm. I ignored it, throwing all my weight backward. The pain was excruciating, silver poisoning spreading through my bloodstream, making my vision blur. Something cracked. The pole gave way suddenly, and I fell backward, my head cracking against stone. Stars burst across my vision, but I forced myself to stay conscious. No time. No time for weakness. My hands were still bound, but I had mobility now. I scrambled across the floor to Ethan, my fingers clumsy and burning as I checked his pulse. Strong. Steady. Whatever they'd given him was wearing off. His eyelids were fluttering, small sounds escaping his throat. "Ethan, baby, wake up. Please wake up." His eyes opened, unfocused. "Mama?" I'm here, sweetheart. But we have to go. Can you stand?" He tried, his legs buckling. I caught him with my bound hands, held him upright. 3 years old, and being asked to run for his life. The injustice of it threatened to choke me. The door. We needed to get through that door. I studied it. Solid oak, reinforced. No way I could break it down, not with my hands tied and my strength fading from the silver poisoning. But the hinges, old, rusted. And on this side, "Ethan, I need you to be very brave." I kept my voice calm even. "Can you look around and find something metal? Like a rod or a heavy spoon?" He nodded, pulling away from me to search the cellar. My vision was graying at the edges, the poison spreading faster than I'd expected. How much silver had they laced the rope with? "Mama, here!" Ethan dragged over a piece of metal rebar, probably left from some ancient repair. "Good boy. Perfect." I wedged it under the bottom hinge, using the wall for leverage. Pushed with everything I had. The hinge groaned, moved fractionally. "Help Mama push." Ethan's small hands joined mine on the bar. Together we leaned our weight into it. The hinge gave way with a screech of tortured metal. 2 more to go. And my strength was fading fast, black spots dancing in my vision. The second hinge was easier, the metal fatigued, ready to surrender. But the third was stubborn, newer than the others. Footsteps on the stairs above. "Someone's coming." Ethan's voice was small, terrified. "Keep pushing." I ignored the agony in my hands, the poison turning my veins to fire. "Don't stop." The footsteps grew closer. Male voices, discussing methods, debating whether to make it look like an accident or just disappear the bodies entirely. The hinge shrieked and gave way. I pulled Ethan back as the door tilted inward, still attached by the lock but compromised enough that I could force it. Kicked it hard, feeling something in my ankle give, not caring. The door crashed open just as the guards rounded the corner at the top of the stairs. "They're escaping!" I grabbed Ethan's hand and ran. The cellar connected to tunnels, old service passages that ran beneath the palace. I chose directions at random, praying, hoping, my bound hands making balance nearly impossible. Behind us, shouts echoed. Radios crackled. We emerged into a kitchen, startling night staff who stared at us in shock. I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Through another door, into a corridor I didn't recognize. "Stop them!" Guards appeared ahead. Different uniforms. Not Garrett's people. I had no way to know if they were loyal to the king or the council. I pulled Ethan behind me, backing toward a window. 4th floor, maybe 5th. Too high to jump. The guards advanced, their postures uncertain. They'd been told to secure all exits, to lock down the palace. They hadn't been told why, or who they were looking for. "Please." My voice came out broken, desperate. "I need to get to the king. It's urgent. His son, his heir, is in danger." One of the guards' eyes widened in recognition as he looked at Ethan. "That's him. The boy from earlier. Sir, I think—" "The council has ordered a complete lockdown." Another interrupted. "No exceptions." "The council is trying to kill us." The words exploded from me. "Councilman Garrett kidnapped us. Tied us up in the wine cellar. He's planning to murder the king's heir and blame it on rogues." They exchanged glances, uncertain. One reached for his radio. "Don't." I stepped forward, pleading. "Please, I don't know who you can trust, but if you have any loyalty to your king, if you care at all about protecting his bloodline, help us. Or at least don't stop us." A long moment of silence, then the youngest guard lowered his weapon. "The king's in the council chamber, main wing, top floor." He stepped aside. "But ma'am, they've got guards loyal to Garrett stationed at every approach. You'll never get through." "Then tell me another way." He hesitated, then nodded toward a side passage. "Old servants' stairs. They'll take you to the floor below the council chamber. From there, you can access the king's private office. It connects directly to the chamber through a concealed door." Hope flared in my chest. "Thank you." I'll tell anyone who asks that you overpowered us and fled toward the East Wing." He met my eyes. Long live the king, and his heir. The other guards nodded slowly, stepping aside. I ran, Ethan's hand tight in mine, my body screaming with pain. The servants' stairs were narrow, dark, clearly unused. We climbed until my legs felt like they'd give out, until every breath was knives in my chest. Finally, a door. I pushed through it into a richly appointed corridor, the king's private wing. His office was easy to find, the only door with the royal crest. Locked, of course. But the lock was meant to keep out humans, not desperate Omegas with nothing left to lose. I slammed my shoulder against it, once, twice. On the third try, something gave. We tumbled into a room that smelled of cedar and old books and him. And there, on the far wall, a seam in the paneling that betrayed the hidden door. I found the release mechanism, pressed it. The panel swung inward, revealing the council chamber beyond. The king stood at the center of a half-circle of counselors, his posture radiating barely contained violence. Blood stained his shirt, not from the earlier attack, but fresh. Recent. One of the counselors held a hand to his bleeding nose. "You forget yourself, Your Majesty." Garrett's voice rang out. He stood at the head of the council, his expression cold. "We are trying to help you see reason." "Help?" The king's laugh was savage. "You lying to me about Elena's death was help. Arranging marriages without my consent was help. Challenging my authority at every turn was help. We preserved the stability of the kingdom while you wallowed in grief over an Omega whore." The king moved like lightning, had Garrett by the throat before anyone could react. "Say another word about her, and I'll rip your tongue out through your neck." "Your Majesty." I stumbled into the room, Ethan in my arms, my bound hands raised. "Stop!" Every head swiveled toward us. The king's eyes went wide, then wild. In an instant he'd released Garrett, crossed the distance between us, his hands gentle despite his fury as he took in my bound wrists, the burns, my bleeding ankle. "Who did this?" His voice was barely human. "Who dared?" "Garrett." I swayed, exhaustion and poison finally overwhelming me. "He took us. Planned to kill us both. Make it look like rogues." The king's head turned slowly toward the councilman, who'd gone pale. "Is this true?" "She's lying. Clearly delusional from whatever happened. The wine cellar." My legs gave out. The king caught me, lowered me carefully to the floor while keeping Ethan close. We were in the old wine cellar, his guards, 2 of them downstairs, and the ropes, silver-laced. "Check my wrists." The king examined the burns, his expression going absolutely cold. Then he looked at Garrett with eyes that promised death. "Councilman Garrett, you are under arrest for treason, attempted murder, conspiracy against the crown." His voice carried absolute authority. "Guards, true guards, not those bought by the council, take him to the dungeons and find his accomplices, everyone who was part of this." Guards I hadn't noticed, the king's personal security, moved immediately. Garrett tried to protest, to call for support from the other counselors. But one look at the king's face silenced him. As they dragged Garrett away, the king turned to the remaining council members. "Let me be very clear about how things will proceed from this moment forward. Elena is my chosen mate, my queen, the mother of my heir. Anyone who challenges this, who questions her place at my side, will answer to me personally. Am I understood?" Silence. Then slowly, the counselors bowed their heads in submission. "Good. Now get out, all of you." They fled. Alone with us at last, the king's carefully maintained control shattered. His hands shook as he worked at the ropes binding my wrists, cursing at the silver content, the burns it had left. "I'm sorry." The words kept spilling from him. "God, Elena, I'm so sorry. I should have protected you better. Should have known the council would—" "You couldn't have known." I touched his face with my freed hand, wincing at the pain. "But we need medical attention. The silver—" "Already sent for the healers." He pulled Ethan into his other arm, holding us both. "They'll be here any moment. And then I'm destroying everyone who was part of this." Ethan stirred against his chest. "Father?" The word stopped everything. The king's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, Ethan. I'm here. You're safe now. Mama saved us. She broke the door." "She did?" The king looked at me with something like awe. Of course she did. Healers arrived, an entire team, carrying supplies, radiating competence. They took over immediately, cleaning my wounds, administering something for the silver poisoning that burned going down but cleared my head, checking Ethan thoroughly despite his protests that he felt fine. Through it all, the king never left our side, never stopped touching one or both of us, as if reassuring himself we were real. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. I'd lost all sense of time again. Finally, the healers declared us stable, gave instructions for continued care, and withdrew. Dawn light crept through the windows, painting everything gold. I need to tell you something. The king's voice was rough with exhaustion. Earlier, when the council was pressuring me, I told them I'd already chosen my queen, that there would be no political marriage, no compromise. I heard. I leaned against him, too tired to maintain distance. Garrett mentioned it. I meant it, Elena. Not as a political move, not as protection, though it serves that purpose. He tilted my chin up, his eyes fierce and tender. I meant it because I've been yours since that first night. Because 4 years of searching didn't diminish what I felt. It only proved how deep it went. We barely know each other. Then let me learn. His thumb traced my cheekbone. Let me spend the rest of my life learning every detail, every fear and hope and dream. Let me prove that what's between us is worth fighting for. I wanted to argue. Wanted to list all the reasons it was impossible, impractical. But looking at him, at this powerful king who'd challenged his entire council for me, who held our son with such tenderness, I couldn't find the words. I'm scared, I admitted instead, of this world, of failing you both, of not being enough. You broke through a locked door with your hands tied and silver poisoning in your veins. A slight smile touched his lips. You carried our son through a palace full of enemies and made it to me when anyone else would have given up. You've survived 4 years alone, built a life from nothing, and raised the most incredible child I've ever met. His forehead pressed to mine. You are more than enough, Elena. You always have been. Ethan nestled between us, made a small sound of contentment. Are we staying? Here? I looked at my son, then at the king. At the future that terrified and tempted me in equal measure. Yes, I whispered. We're staying. The smile that broke across the king's face was like sunrise. 3 months later, the coronation ceremony was smaller than tradition dictated, my insistence, and one of the first decisions I'd made as queen-to-be that the council hadn't dared challenge. Just close allies, trusted guards, and a handful of pack leaders who'd proven their loyalty in the weeks following Garrett's arrest. I stood before the assembly in a gown that felt both foreign and right, deep blue silk that moved like water, simple in design but unmistakably regal. My hair, once always pulled back for practicality, had been arranged in soft waves that Ethan had declared made me look like a princess. The king, my king, though I was still getting used to thinking of him that way, stood beside me in formal regalia. His hand found mine as the officiant began the bonding ceremony. Before the throne and witnesses gathered, do you, Elena, accept the bond of mate and sovereign? Do you pledge your strength to the kingdom and your heart to its king? I looked at Ethan, seated in the front row between 2 guards he'd befriended, his face glowing with pride. Then at the man beside me who'd spent 3 months proving every promise he'd made. I do. The king's turn. Do you, bearing witness to this bond, accept Elena as your mate and queen? Do you pledge your protection to her and your heart to the family you share? I do. With everything I am. The marks exchanged were private, done weeks ago in the quiet of his chambers, witnessed only by us. But the ceremonial bite here, gentle and symbolic, sealed what was already true. We were bound. Completely. The assembly erupted in applause as we turned to face them, king and queen, united. Ethan launched himself from his seat, and the king caught him, lifting him high. My family, he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. My queen and my heir. Let anyone who would challenge this come forward now. Silence. Complete and absolute. Later, at the celebration that followed, I found myself on a balcony, needing air. The king found me there, as I'd known he would. Escaping already? Gentle teasing in his voice. Just catching my breath. I leaned into him as his arms came around me. It's still surreal. 3 months ago, I was measuring flour in a small-town bakery. Now I'm queen. Do you regret it? I considered the question honestly. The past 3 months had been difficult. Learning court protocols, navigating political relationships, accepting that I'd never have the anonymity I'd treasured. But they'd also been filled with moments of unexpected joy, watching the king teach Ethan to control his emerging powers. Long conversations that stretched into dawn, the slow building of trust, and something deeper. No, I said finally. I don't regret it. Good. He pressed a kiss to my temple, because I've grown rather attached to having you here. Rather attached. Desperately, hopelessly attached. His arms tightened. You've changed everything, Elena. The palace feels like a home now instead of a prison. Ethan has brought laughter into halls that have been silent too long. And you... His voice roughened. You've given me a reason to be more than just a king. I turned in his arms, meeting his eyes. I love you. The words were new between us, spoken only twice before, tentative and testing. But tonight, with the bond fresh and the future spreading before us, they felt like truth crystallizing into certainty. I love you too. His lips found mine, gentle and reverent, my queen, my mate, my miracle. Behind us, through the windows, I could see Ethan dancing with one of the young guard's daughters, his laughter carrying on the night air, safe, happy, surrounded by people who would protect him not out of duty but genuine affection. This was what I'd been running toward all along, I realized. Not away from danger, but toward this moment, this family, this love that had terrified me because it felt too big, too impossible. But impossible things happened every day. Like Omega bakers becoming queens, like lost heirs being found, like love surviving 4 years of separation and fear to bloom again, stronger than before. The king's hand found mine, our fingers lacing together. Through the bond, I felt his contentment, his peace. And beneath it, the steady pulse of love that would carry us through whatever came next. We were home. All of us. Finally.